Hello there and welcome to the Q&A show. My name is Cyrus and I'm here every Monday evening live at 10 o'clock UK time, here to take your questions, and every week we have a very special guest to answer your questions. And delighted to say that on tonight's programme we've got our very own Dr Grady McMurtry on the line. Dr Grady, how are you doing?
Hello there, sir. We're doing fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Grady, for joining us. As always, looking good as always as well. Now, Grady, before we start, we're going to go into this particular article, and it's very close to your heart and close to your neighbourhood as well, because we're going to talk a little bit about the recent hurricane that took place in the US, and it hit your neighbourhood as well. But I just want to give our viewers a little bit of a background into this, and then we'll get your personal perspective, what you think the causes of this are, and give us an insight into your own personal experience. So this is basically it. This is talking about this hurricane that crashed into Florida with 120 mile per hour winds before battering the coastal areas and producing at least 27 tornadoes across the state. At least 17 people were killed as a result of this hurricane. Thousands of homes were destroyed before the hurricane even made landfall. Many of them were mobile homes in communities for senior citizens. The director of the Florida Division of Emergency Management said the hurricanes also knocked out power for more than 3 million homes and businesses. The hurricane dumped so much rain over parts of Tampa Bay area that it qualified as a 1 in 1,000 year rainfall event. A woman has also given birth to a miracle baby during the Hurricane Milton after making a perilous journey to hospital while in labour. Kenzie Lehuen, who is 39 weeks pregnant, witnessed the devastation from a hospital window with a tree being ripped out of the ground as the massive storm pounded Florida. And we've got the photo of this amazing miracle baby that we can call it, and it's just incredible when you see, out of all the storms and destruction that's going on at the same time, all of a sudden miracles can take place, and this beautiful baby was born, thank God, all safe with the parents as well. So Dr Grady, the big question is, obviously you're from Florida, we speak to you when you're in Florida as well. What was your insight into this? Tell us what you experienced. Did this hit your neighbourhood? Tell our viewers, please.
Oh, it did hit our neighborhood, yes. And I would point out we've had 2 major hurricanes in a matter of 2 weeks. Helene went up the Gulf Coast as a Cat 3 and caused tremendous flooding along the Gulf Coast. During that storm, we living in Orlando, which is 50 miles inland, we had 70-mile-an-hour winds and about 3 inches of rain. That's not particularly significant. We're used to that. But then Milton came along, and we had 70-mile-an-hour winds, 90-mile-an-hour gusts, and somewhere between 10 and 13 inches of rain at my house. And again, we were not in the worst area. It's the coast. It's the storm surge is the #1 problem. And we had a high storm surge during Helene, and that damaged considerable amounts of homes and businesses along the Gulf Coast south of Tampa. This one was supposed to go right into Tampa Bay, and if that had been true, it would have been twice as bad as it actually was, because it would have driven the entire Tampa Bay inland with a storm surge of about 15 feet. In God's grace, and I think answer to prayer, the storm actually turned further to the east, came in near the south side of Sarasota, and because of that, the circulation of the wind, instead of the circulation going to the east, the circulation was to the west. It actually blew water out of Tampa Bay into the Gulf. And that, in spite of all the destruction, was a real blessing.
Grady, you said this was a second. You said this was a second storm to hit as well within 2-week period. Now, we saw on the news that the authorities were trying their hardest to remove some of that debris before the second storm hit. I don't think they managed to actually remove all that debris. So was there were people's houses affected even more with this flying debris from the first storm?
There was some of that. As hard as we tried, and I want to say that Governor DeSantis did a magnificent job, as hard as he tried to get the debris out before the second storm hit, it simply wasn't possible. The destruction to the roads, the destruction to the bridges, particularly along the Gulf Coast, but also along the East Coast, with the Atlantic, it simply wasn't possible. The number of truckloads alone is in the thousands and thousands of truckloads, and you've got to have a place to put it too. We didn't have the
Yeah.
people to pick it up. We couldn't get in to remove it, and of course, where we could put it was a problem too. So it's a multitude of problems.
Yeah.
The worst is the water damage. The wind damage was also significant, but it's the water damage. I mean, I had personal friends living on the coast whose the first storm totaled 2 cars and flooded their home.
Wow. Wow.
The second storm was worse.
Wow. I mean, I remember a few days before the storm actually hit, we heard this storm was coming towards Florida and such things, and they were saying this is going to be a worse storm than the past 7 years initially, because 7 years is actually the Hurricane Irma, which I was actually personally in Florida at the time with all our family, and we were hit by Hurricane Irma. And I tell you something, that was an experience and a half, and I wouldn't want to repeat that ever again. Thank God we were all safe. But then when this storm was coming even closer, the closer to the time, they said this is the worst storm in over a century. So this is something that was, were people anticipating this? Were they prepared enough for this? Is there anything more they could have done with more advanced time or anything like that to have saved their homes in any way or saved their properties in any way?
When you have 10 feet of water coming at you, there isn't anything you can do.
Wow.
Now, mind you, here in Florida, we have very high building standards, specifically for hurricanes. For decades and decades, Florida has built up and provided materials in advance for these kinds of storms. Everything is pre-positioned, but you can't use it till after the storm hits and you know where you need these things to go. So we pre-position, we have warehouses for goods, we have the trucks ready to go. We bring in 50,000 linemen from other states, even National Guard troops from other states. And so we're ready. But the problem is you can't fix something until it's broke.
Exactly. You can only prepare yourself so much, right?
Exactly.
So what is the state, what are the people there at the moment? Can you give us an insight? They must be absolutely devastated. I assume they're insured, but maybe are some of them homeless at the moment? Do you know anything?
Well, there's the homelessness, that's true, but we had mandatory evacuations from the most, the worst areas we thought we'd have. And there was a lot of evacuation, but there's some people that insist on writing it out. And of course, a few of them died from that. We lost about 17 people in Florida just from this storm, but we lost hundreds to Helene a couple of weeks earlier, particularly up in North Carolina. So again, we've had a particularly hard-hit year, but I would want to point out from a scientific standpoint, these two very large storms, and particularly Milton, this last one, started off the coast of Mexico in a very hot area, the Bay of Campeche, and then headed to Florida. Typically, our hurricanes develop by the hot air coming off of Africa, coming across the Atlantic, and picking up speed with the warm water in the islands areas. So this was a pretty unusual thing. Somebody asked me, well, wait a minute, we had Helene, and 2 weeks later we've got Milton. What happened to the ones in between? Because it's supposed to be alphabetical.
Yes.
I said, well, it's real simple. They did happen, but they're out in the middle of the Atlantic. One headed to Greenland, and the other one made a U-turn and headed back to Morocco. Fact of the matter is, they're both gone now. I mean, you wouldn't even know they were there. But we had them, but they were of no significance. And if you'll take a look at the earlier part of this season, there were several hurricanes, but they turned and went right up the middle of the Atlantic, didn't hit the U.S. at all.
You mentioned also Governor Ron DeSantis. He's been quite supportive. He's done a good job. Tell our viewers more about it. We obviously see a little bit of him on UK news, but tell us what exactly was he doing before and after that storm?
Well, again, you have to understand that Governor DeSantis has been a military officer. He was a JAG, Judge Advocate Court lawyer. So he has a military background. He's disciplined. He plans very well. And Florida, in general, every county in Florida, the state as a whole, we have our own emergency services, and they prepare very well. This is not our first hurricane. It's not our first dance. And so over the years, with the increase in building standards, with the increase in putting pre-prepared materials in locations around the state, having the people that we will need pre-positioned and already called into duty, like the National Guard troops, like the utility people from other states. The pre-planning cuts down a lot, but you still can't replace 1,000 power poles until they're broken.
Exactly, and we've also seen reports that they're going to use this opportunity to try and rebuild Florida to make more structured and stronger homes as well, because some of these homes were built many years ago, maybe even not strong enough to withhold such hurricane wind speeds as well. So do you think they will start rebuilding and rebuild stronger properties to last out from these further hurricanes in the future?
Well, first of all, I would point out to you that many decades ago, under other administrations, people were allowed to build in swamps that they should never have been allowed to. People were allowed to build along the coast where they never should have been allowed to build in the first place. That was not good. Now, I can tell you that there were houses built to modern standards on the Gulf Coast that survived Helene and 2 weeks later could not survive Milton.
Wow.
And so one of the things that's going to happen from this is we're going to require that houses that are built on the coast, first of all, you're not going to be able to get insurance. So if you build one and it's gone, it's a total loss to you.
Wow.
Secondly, because of the storm surge, they're not going to allow houses to be built on the ground. They're not going to allow houses to be built on shorter stilts near the ocean. They're going to be requiring people building 19-foot pillars driven into the sand, steel columns driven into the sand, because that's all we've got, before you can build a house. And so the building permit qualifications are going to eliminate many of these houses being rebuilt and many of these locations being rebuilt on. But also remember that much of this damage was because of older mobile homes, which could not stand up to the tornadoes. They could stand up to the hurricanes, but they couldn't stand up to the tornadoes. Now, you mentioned a few tornadoes. I'm sorry. We actually spawned probably 150 tornadoes, most of them down in the southeast part of Florida, but they flattened mobile homes all over the place.
Okay, thank you so much indeed for giving us that insight, and we're so glad that you and your family are also safe, Grady, which is good news as well. Just going to some of our dear viewers who have written into us, so I want to remind our viewers we are live for the next 1 hour, or just 44 minutes exactly, live at revelationtv.com. SMS details are also on the screen. Now, Dave's written in from Ireland, Grady, and he's saying, good evening, Cyrus and Dr Grady. Do we know with absolute certainty that Judas is in hell? I ask this because I was clearly remorseful and realised the 30 pieces of silver meant nothing to him. Although he didn't deal with his remorse in the right way, could God have understood and been merciful and forgiven him? Judas was distraught and thought killing himself was his only option. And although we know that that wasn't the case, haven't we all at some point in our lives been frightened and made the wrong decision in a state of panic and fear? Many blessings from David in Ireland.
Well, David, the fact of the matter is we don't know. And I think you need to keep that in mind. We don't know. But even a deathbed salvation is possible. So we don't know. Now, on the other hand, we know that he was a participant in God's plan because somebody had to betray Jesus. Now, remember, the Jews didn't kill Jesus, the Romans did, but it was all in God's foresight and plan. Jesus knew what he was facing when he went to Jerusalem. He knew that he was facing the cross, and he knew that he would be betrayed. But my personal opinion is that he would be in hell, but that's only my personal opinion, and we don't know.
Thank you, Grady. This one is from Chris to say, good evening, Brother Cy and Dr. Grady. Chris from Penzance. What is the difference between the Old Testament priest who was anointed by God as from the modern ordained priest who is ordained by the bishop? The domination was man-made. That's from Chris.
Well, the first real difference is, of course, in the fact that the priest in the Old Testament was a part of the system started by God in the wilderness. When he chose Aaron to be the first Kohen Hagadol, the first high priest in human history. And so the problem was there that, of course, many of them, particularly down at the time of the Pharisees and so on, had corrupted their office. There were high priests who were quite corrupt. But this was a formal theocracy system that had been set up originally as the intermediary between man and God. But of course, when Jesus came and he died and was resurrected, he became our high priest and the one last lamb that we would ever need in sacrifice. Now, from then on, we now have the Christian system, not the Judaic system. And when it comes to the priests, as you were referring to it, and system of bishops and archbishops and so on, depending upon your denomination, there is supposed to have been the laying on of hands going back for 2,000 years and the transferring of that. But again, even priests, even bishops, as you know, are simply humans. And again, there's no reason to say that every one of them is perfect, right? And so it's two different systems, but use the word priest. But one is the Old Testament system that God set up because Jesus had not yet come. And the new system that we have, and of course, it depends on your denomination, because some denominations use the word priests and some don't. But the authority is supposed to have come from the first century disciples with the laying on of hands century after century.
Thank you, Grady. This next one here is talking about the hurricanes that we just talked about. He says, hi, do you think that these stronger hurricanes are God's retribution for the way the US has treated Israel by demanding a ceasefire, etc.? God bless.
Well, those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And I hate to say this, but the current U.S. administration is cursing Israel, which, of course, those of us who are committed Christians and who love Israel are just absolutely sick about it. However, I would also point out that the number of abortions that we have and many other things that we probably ought not to talk about on TV, but there's a lot of sin going on in the world, and there's certainly a lot of sin in the U.S. Now, from a biblical standpoint, Amos 4:7, God uses the weather, God is in charge of the weather, and he uses it to actually bless people and to chastise people. Now, again, I don't want to say that I know with absolute certainty, but I do think that the U.S. is being chastised and that we can turn it around. The question is, will we? And that I don't know.
What do you make out of the political situation right now? Obviously, we've got the elections coming up very shortly in the US. Kamala Harris, Donald Trump. What is the general consensus really amongst the Christians in the community that you're in, or fellow Christians that you speak to? What are they saying?
Well, of course, we're all very hopeful of Trump being elected. But I can tell you that the Democratic Party, which is today turned into the Communist Party in the United States, has raised 3 times the money. Now, a lot of it has come from foreign countries, but we're not supposed to allow foreign money to be used in American elections. But there's been a lot of foreign influence, particularly money from people like George Soros. And when you're outspent 3-1, it's very hard to win a political campaign.
Well, we know Kamala Harris is very tech savvy as well and knows how to get the young people's votes going on social media and such things. But interesting times. Dr. Grady, this next one here is from Stephen. Hi, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. Just to say, I have watched debates with Bill Nye and Ken Ham. I always feel that Ken Ham always manages to handle Bill Nye pretty well. No disrespect to Ken Ham. I would like to see a debate with you, Dr. Grady, and Bill Nye, because I think your scientific mind would totally sort out any questions that Nye has, because sometimes Ken Ham struggles with the scientific questions that Nye throws at him. God bless you all at Revelation TV, from Stephen. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, I was greatly disappointed in that debate. I would prefer not to get into the personality details of it. I will say that someone like myself would have defeated Bill Nye very easily. Bill Nye used some of the most ridiculous and so easily, torn apart reasons why he was promoting evolution. Um, but yes, it would have been much better if somebody that could have really taken Bill Nye straight on. I mean, his arguments on things like what's called the proof by ranking are so easily debunked that I could teach a child to do it. And so that was not a good debate at all.
Okay. This next one here is from Dave to say hi to you both. Two questions. The first one, after the death of Jesus, why was he put in a tomb and not laid beneath the soil like everyone else? Did they know that he would come back to life?
Well, remember that, of course, there were those who he had told that he would, but that they were not necessarily believing it until it occurred. But the reason for the tomb is quite simple. A rich man who had become a believer offered his own tomb that he had prepared for himself and had never been used before. And in order to honor the Lord in his faithfulness, he asked to be given the body and put him in his own tomb. But that's because he was a rich man. And Jesus could have been put someplace else, but he still would have been resurrected.
The second question is, have any actual gravestones from back then been found with inscriptions on?
The gravestones? The tomb that Jesus was placed had the rolling stone of a rich family, and we have found tombs that even have the stone still there. Now, the one that is at Gordon's tomb, the stone no longer exists, the original stone, but we have found tombs with the original stones. Now, in terms of grave markers and tombstones, as you might think of, say, in an English cemetery, we have found lots of gravestones, but I'm not sure why that would have significance.
Alan in Bolton's written in, does Dr. Grady think the increased bombings in Gaza and Lebanon will have any effect on which parties people vote for in the upcoming US election?
I would certainly hope so. Because, first of all, the majority of the Jewish population in the United States has voted Democratic for literally generations, primarily because they were associated with unions. And that comes from the guild system that existed prior to that. And you have to remember that Israel was founded not as a religious state, but as a secular state by unions. But I would hope that the Jewish population can see that their friends are in the Republican Party and not in the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party has been sending money to Gaza, to Hamas, to Lebanon. They just sent over $150 million to help Hezbollah. Now, how in the world can you feed the hand that's trying to destroy you?
Well, continuing from that, Dr. Grady, this one's from Arnie. He's saying, have you noticed when Hamas and now Hezbollah fired thousands of rockets and missiles into Israel, can you recall the UN calling for an immediate ceasefire? No, neither can I. But what happens when Israel says enough is enough and decides to take out the leadership and all the missiles ranged against them? Ceasefire, cries Biden and the UN. Whose side are they on? Not the Jews? Oh, and what a surprise. And do the BBC, or rather HPC, the Hamas Propaganda Corporation, call them terrorists? No, they're just armed men. Shalom, from Arnie.
Shalom. Well, I think that you've actually seen that. Israel has done a brilliant job of taking out the leadership, both in Hamas and Hezbollah.
Definitely.
And I hope they keep doing it, frankly. So Israel has been doing a masterful job of that. Now, as far as the UN, we know, we have found the documents signed by UN secretaries of various departments that, number one, the UN was helping Hamas in Gaza, but documents were just released today or yesterday showing that the UN has also been promoting Hezbollah in Lebanon. The UN is not the friend of anybody. They are trying to institute a one world government of their own.
What do you make out the UNRWA's, the schools as well, the education system of teaching and really radicalizing those young kids as well to hate Israel?
Well, but you see, this is a part of the UN's policies under the current Secretary General, who is himself a heavily socialistic guy. Um, but, for instance, people are familiar with the organization UNICEF, correct?
Correct.
Who was the first, well, not generation, the first Secretary General of the UNICEF organization sponsored by the UN? Well, he was the grandson of Thomas Huxley, Julian Huxley, who said that the purpose of UNICEF was, in fact, to take the teaching of evolution to the world. Now, I'm only paraphrasing him,
Yeah.
but that UNICEF was to be an agent to teach evolution.
Wow. This next one here is from Paulette and Ken, just asking about the war in Lebanon. Hello, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. It is very sad that it seems Christians are being killed in Lebanon and many innocent people. We know it is a war that we are in, also a spiritual battle. What can we say to friends and family or extended family that are Christians who appear to be anti-Israel? We would like your opinion. That's a very good question. What would you say, Dr. Grady?
Well, let's change the wording slightly. Instead of just anti-Israel, let's talk about anti-Semitic. If a person is anti-Semitic, they are by definition anti-Christian. Think about it. You know, Jesus was born a Jew, lived a Jew, died a Jew, raised a Savior. But to be anti-Semitic is to be anti-Christian. You cannot be anti-Semitic and be a genuine Christian. Now, you can claim it all you want, but the fact of the matter is you're denying your own supposed religion.
And I also believe that Israel are not going in just willy-nilly going and bombing random locations. They're very strategic. They're always going for the leaders, whether it's the leaders of Hamas, the leaders of Hezbollah, the leader of these terror organizations as well. And sadly, there are innocent lives that are killed along the way. But it's very, very strategic what Israel are doing, whereas I totally, on the other hand, see Hezbollah, Hamas, they're just going for the civilian population and even making their own people suffer at the same time. What do you think?
October 7 would be a perfect example of that. We've also found documents that on October 7, Hezbollah was supposed to coordinate with Hamas, and they didn't. And this is one reason why there was a failure of their plan. But Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, they're against people. The Jews have been incredibly surgical. They're not against people. They're simply against the radical ideology of a portion of the people, that anti-Jewish element that insists on killing any Jew, whereas the Jews are going out and they're taking out the leadership to prevent further damage. And they're really helping to protect all of us.
This next one's from Nigel to say, good evening. I was wondering, what are God's boundaries for the land of Israel?
If you're talking about the original boundaries, it's really quite simple. When you take a look at a map of the Middle East, as you might suspect if you were to think about it, the Negev Desert in the south end, with the Rift Valley, the Jordan Valley on the east, and of course the boundary that currently is with Egypt, about the right place. And then it would go north between the Jordan River, basically, and the Mediterranean. But when it gets up to the north end, it would then go out and around in a circular way Damascus. Now, if you think about that from an aerial standpoint, say a satellite standpoint, it would look somewhat like a lamb shank bone. And isn't that an appropriate shape for the land of Israel and what God gave Abraham?
Very good indeed, Dr. Grady. This one's from Gilbert in Lincolnshire. Dear friends in Jesus, I recently visited the holy well of St. Milburger in Shropshire and bathed my eyes in the holy water in an attempt to heal my eye problems, but it all happened that I got eye infection. My wife said I should boil the water first, but I thought that might boil the water will boil away the holy healing powers. Does boiling holy water make it lose its holiness or not? Interesting question.
Well, I would suggest to you that water isn't holy. Water is just water. The healer is Jesus, and what you really need to do is pray to Jesus, the healer, that the Holy Spirit would come to you and do his work, because he is the perfect doctor.
This one's from Bill in Gateshead. He said, could you please answer this question? How did Jesus appear to the apostles in the room after his resurrection when the door was locked? Many blessings, from Bill.
Well, we envision that he walked through the wall, and I think he did, to confront Thomas in particular. But the reason he was able to do that was he's more real than the wall. And I mean that in a truly scientific sense. Remember that you have a table, you have a chair, you have your furniture, you have your house, and if you hit it, it's hard. But the fact of the matter is that over 99% of it is just pure space. And if you're God and you put every atom into the universe, you can also command every atom, every molecule. And if you're Jesus, all you have to do is tell the molecules in your body to miss the molecules on the wall, and you'll go right through it.
This one's from Satinda, saying greetings to you both. I know how Dr. Grady likes his end time questions. However, on this occasion, I only have one about astronomy, I'm afraid. There's quite a few reports about the Star of Jacob making an appearance in the skies soon. Apparently, this star went supernova around 2,000 years ago, and the light is reaching us now. In addition, this star also appeared to be mentioned in the scripture too, the biblical reference being Numbers 24:17. Does Dr. Grady have any opinion on this? And if so, I'd be grateful if he would share this with us. Many blessings in Christ. That's from Satinda.
I'm afraid I put that down to coincidence. I don't think that that's a fulfillment of prophecy.
Okay, very good indeed. Grady, this next one here is from Marilyn. Marilyn saying, hi, Cy and Dr. Grady. Glad to see you're okay. My question is this. In Genesis, the giants were known as the Nephilim. How big were they, and could they have built the pyramids, an amazing, huge structure in Peru, which could have been built pre-Noah's flood, in a time from creation that lasted 2,000 years? What sort of world was it like this time that made God decide to destroy it? And that's from Marilyn in Wales.
Okay, well, there's a misconception there, Marilyn. First of all, yes, the Nephilim, which word means giants. Nephil is the giant, Nephilim is the plural. But these are human beings that Satan was using to intimidate the rest of the population. They did not build the pyramids. They did not build the structures in South America. They all died in the flood of Noah. There were giants after the flood of Noah, but there is a different Hebrew word that is used. After the flood, they're the Rephaim, and such as Goliath or King Og. But these were natural human beings. They weren't in any way supernatural. And so, first of all, you've got the pyramids in the wrong place. The pyramids occur roughly 4,000 years ago, about 2000 BC, when the people who left the Tower of Babel, in fact, started to build these structures. Now, if you'll take a look at Genesis chapter 10, the Table of Nations, we know that the man named Mizrah, and in the Bible you see Mizraim, it means Mizrah and his descendants, were the Egyptians that came after the Tower of Babel. So the buildings you've got in the wrong time frame. And the Nephilim themselves were giants. We don't know exactly what their size was, but they certainly could have been at least equal to King Og, who was roughly 10 foot tall. And they were being used by Satan to intimidate the population before the flood in order to prevent the birth of Jesus Christ. And the plan almost succeeded.
Can you give our viewers an insight how you think that those pyramids were actually made?
Oh, we know how they were made. I mean, there's really not much to guess anymore. Of course, it was a mystery for a long time, but the bottom third was built with simply rollers and blocks being rolled up sand hills. But the top two-thirds of them, many people don't realize this. When you see the pictures of the pyramids, when you are standing at the bottom of the pyramids and you look up the pyramids, and you have a perspective, a visual perspective. And your visual perspective is that the stones at the top are the same size as the stones at the bottom. That's not true. The stones actually get smaller as you go up. And two-thirds of the structures in the bottom one-third of the pyramid. And so
Yep.
it's easier to place the bottom stones with rollers and ramps. But the top portion, because you're moving smaller stones, what some of the pyramids were built was they built what today we'd call a Swiss tower. And they simply built it in the middle, and with blocks and tallies and cranes, which they had. They have all these things. They just don't have diesel engines, but they've got block and tackle. They got pulleys, and they were able to place the blocks then on the upper portion. Now, the last thing to be placed on top of a pyramid was supposed to be a 100% metal pyramid-shaped stone, but it wasn't a stone; it was actually metal. But none of the pyramids ever had it. There is one in a museum that was found, but it was never placed there because they could never figure out how to put it on the top.
Very interesting indeed. Very, very interesting. Thank you, Grady. This next one here is from Samuel to say, what does the Bible say regarding dinosaurs and their existence? That's just one for you, Grady.
Oh yeah, I mean, the Old Testament is replete with references to dinosaurs. First of all, of course, remember the word dinosaur was not invented until Sir Richard Owen in England invented it in 1841. So you're not going to find the word in the Bible. But before that, the most common word was dragon. Now, God clearly tells us he created dinosaurs, which were land-dwelling reptiles. Not all of the reptiles are dinosaurs, but land-dwelling. On day 6, on the day before he finishes by completing Adam and Eve as the last created thing. Now, they were vegetarians. Notice Genesis chapter 1, 29 and 30. They were vegetarians. They didn't eat people. They had sharp claws, sharp teeth, some of them, but they were still vegetarians. Many vegetarians have sharp claws and sharp teeth. Today, evolutionists at the highest level agree that T-Rexes, velociraptors were vegetarians. They were on the ark because they live on dry land. They breathe air through nostrils, the qualification. And there are 12 references to dinosaurs in the Old Testament after the flood. You have Behemoth in Job chapter 40, verses 15 to 18. You also have reptiles that people associate with the dinosaur period, such as Leviathan, mentioned 5 times in the Old Testament. In Isaiah, you have 2 references to flying reptiles. In Micah, you have a reference. We have these different references. So Psalm 91, verse 13, many translations use the word dragon or dinosaur. So in total, there are 14 references to dinosaurs or their relatives, as people would think of it, mentioned in the Old Testament. But we have huge amounts of historical information following the close of the Old Testament that dinosaurs and people lived together until at least the year 1883. That's my last known reference of a live dinosaur, and that was in Bolivia in South America.
1883.
Yes, sir. Wow. Remember that the story of St. George and the Dragon was a real story. That's not fiction. Remember the epic poetry of Beowulf, for instance, and some of the antagonists are clearly described as being, one, a pterosaur or a pterodon. But we have art. I mean, we have art all over the world. A Stegosaurus at Angkor Wat, for instance. We have dinosaurs portrayed in figurines in China. In Mexico, supposedly material that is 1,800 to 2,800 years old, with hundreds and hundreds of fired clay figurines of dinosaurs, and some of them with people attached. I can't go through all the history. Cyrus wouldn't let me. But we have written history. For instance, Herodotus, Flavius Josephus, reliable history that's written. We have art, we have artifacts. Uh, so the fact of the matter is that dinosaurs survived in the flood on the ark. They did start to repopulate. Then over centuries, they became extinct, one kind here, one kind there, for very good reasons. But the last known documented dinosaur that we can rely on the documentation is 1883.
Again, then obviously we know the very famous dinosaur with one eye called the Jufinkisaurus as well. That's that one, Grady. What do you think? All right. What do you think about the Loch Ness Monster? Obviously,
You
we're
are
still...
so bad.
I
You
know,
are
I'm so sorry,
bad.
and I have to apologise to our dear viewers. What do you
Yes,
make
you
out?
should.
Loch Ness Monster, it's always in the news, and we're always hearing some sort of story, the sighting and everything else. Give us an insight. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, being Scottish, I wish it were true. Secondly, we actually have stories of the same kind of situation. One called Champy from Lake Champlain in the state of Vermont and New York. There's other stories like this from around the world. But what is the reality of it? Well, the reality is, particularly in the case of Loch Ness, and I've been there, at one time we know that Loch Ness was not a lake, it was a fjord. It had an opening to the sea.
Yep.
Now, in more recent times, in the last few hundred years, we know geologically that that area of Scotland has risen up. And when it rose up, the fjord became a lake. It was cut off to the sea. Now, the same thing happened in Lake Champlain. So the North American Indian stories of this are just as reliable as the Loch Ness. And what you had is you had some kind of a large marine reptile, a plesiosaur, a chronosaur, a lasmosaur, that at one time was coming in and out of that fjord and was seen by people. Remember that myth always starts in reality. But as the geological features changed and the fjord became a loch, a lake, then what happened? They were cut off and they no longer came in. But the mythology continued to be perpetuated.
Okay, this one's from Debs. Thank you, Debs, for writing in, asking about the second coming of Jesus. Good evening. I have a tough question. Is Jesus' resurrection the second coming? I can't shake this off and I find more reasons to believe it. Can you help? People argue about pre, mid and post-tribulation rapture. Why? Maybe they are all wrong, which is why they cannot be proven. Maybe. Jesus perhaps has already been with his second coming because that was the resurrection. He became high priest of heaven after his resurrection and not before. He sprinkled his own blood on the table and the temple in heaven when he first ascended. He then had left after death when he told Mary not to touch him. He then came back again. When he came back for the second coming and his disciples were allowed to touch him, and he left again after 40 days. Thank you from Debs. Any thoughts on that one, Dr. Grady?
Oh, yes. Debs, I'm sorry. I would disagree with you completely. The fact of the matter is that the time in which he went to heaven, came back, and then stayed for 40 more days before making his final ascension is all part of the first coming. And Jesus said, wait here actively. Now, when he said, don't touch me, that's not what he said. That's an unfortunate translation. What he said was, do not cling to me. Don't prevent me from going to my Father to get the glorified body that he would return, and he would walk with the disciples and teach them for 40 days. Then there's the ascension. That ends his first coming. And you know this because he said to his disciples, I'm going to go away and I'm going to prepare a place for you. And when it's ready, and the Father says, and this goes back to the wedding ceremonies of the Jews and the building of the Chadar, Jesus says, when the Father says it's ready, I'll come back because I will have prepared the place completely for you. And so there's a second coming that has yet to be fulfilled.
Les has written in asking about the world system. Grady, we know that according to Scripture, the world system is going to get worse, not better, before the return of Jesus. In light of this, how involved should Christians be in politics, which is part of the world system?
Well, first of all, politics is not all part of the world system because God has a political system too. The fact of the matter is, though, we should be very actively involved. I once wrote an article that I said, "You will have the government you deserve." If you do not go out and elect righteous government, you will automatically have elected unrighteous government. Now, things are going to get worse and worse. I agree. But we ought to be fighting it tooth and nail. And the fact of the matter is that this would honor God. And we would want those that are still here, but that He hasn't come back for yet, to live under the most righteous of governments we could possibly give until He finally comes back and gives us the final theocracy.
Josh has written in a question asking about bullying and poor exam grades. Thank you, Josh, for writing in. It's lovely to hear from you, mate. This one says, Cyrus and Dr Grady, since a bullying incident at school, my father has been home educating me. I've recently sat some mock exam papers for my A-levels and did well in 2 of my subjects. God clearly has a plan for me. However, in religious studies, I only got grade E. Do you think that grade E is disappointing? Do you think that grade E is bad for religious education? And what can I do to never see the grade E again? Does my connection with God need to be stronger to avoid grade E? Bless you,
Well,
mate.
I can't, yeah, say, yes, bless you. And as an educator, I appreciate the question. Everybody, God gives gifts. And the fact of the matter is, you need to operate in the gifts that God has given you to be the most successful. But you can train your mind. You can do better in subjects that are not particularly naturally attuned with your particular personality and mentality. And so you certainly can do better. There's no question about that. It's just a matter of effort and a matter of training your mind. But the fact of the matter is, you should be stressing that which you do best. Now, you've got to honor God, and you can pray. Remember, that God knows it all,
Yeah.
and He can bring anything back to your mind, but training your mind helps Him to be able to do that for you. And I simply just suggest to you that you get the materials, then they're available to help you to train your mind to do better in your religious studies, because you've got to put God first before all else.
What I'd love to use this opportunity of saying about Grady, your website as well. Tell our viewers, because you've got so much free content on your website as well that really can help to educate some of our viewers watching us today. Tell us about your website, Grady.
CreationWorldview.org. We have over 100 free articles of different lengths dealing with everything from theology and philosophy to hard science, but it's all written at a very popular level, except for a very small section of technical articles, clearly marked. We have over 450 free short videos. And short mean 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, the kind of thing that you've also seen on Revelation TV. And then, of course, we do have a bookstore. And we have video materials, we have book materials, many of which are not only physically available, but also available for electronic download. And so you have a wide resource there. And we're not the only ones, but we can provide all that for you.
This one's from Eddie. It's written in just asking about the rapture. Hi guys, Dr. Grady, do you believe that scripture says a rapture of the church will happen? Some Christians believe in a pre-trib event. I don't think it is in scripture and gives a false hope to avoid praying effectively. Regards from Eddie in Blackpool.
Actually, Eddie, what I'm worried about with people who teach these various views, and I don't promote any of them. I promote that He's coming back and we're supposed to be working when He gets here, period. But what does concern me is that when people who are teaching pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, a-trib, pan-trib, pre-mill, post-mill, whatever, what happens is this can be a serious distraction to people. And those who think, well, this view allows me to get out before things get bad, I think, had better take another look at the scripture, which says that we are to enter into the sufferings of Christ. Now, if we get out of here without suffering, then we've not entered into the sufferings of Christ, have we? And so I think what you have to do is you have to be prepared to go to the end, even if you get to go out at the beginning.
Very good. This one here is from Les to say, hi, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. What do you think? I know there are some people who consider themselves to be Christians and connected to the local government who are aware of criminal activity towards another Christian. Even though the Christian has complained to the local authorities, they have never contacted the Christian, but rather have allowed worsening the situation to continue, I guess for their own personal reasons. Can you explain this type of behaviour when looked at from a biblical perspective? Also, what would you say about the situation and what is the solution?
Well, I'm a little hard pressed to quite understand the question, I admit, but I think in general the concept is this. People have this mentality.
I think we've just lost your audio, Dr. Grady. We're going to try and call you back any second now. I just want to remind our viewers we've got a few minutes of the programme left. We've still got some emails to go through as well, but I wanted to tell you about the video on demand that we have on our website. Go to revelationtv.com/videos and select the Q&A show, because Dr. Grady is kindly dedicating his time for tonight's programme, and over the past few weeks, months and years as well, we've got so many of our wonderful programmes on our video on demand. Just go on to revelationtv.com/videos. You can select the Q&A show and you can watch those programmes there. Have we got Dr. Grady back? Okay, cool. So we're just getting Grady back. Grady, you there?
I am there.
Fantastic. There we go. We're all good.
Just like I was in the studio with you.
Exactly. Order is resumed. Very good indeed, Dr. Grady. So, yeah, did you answer that last question?
Well, I started to try. I said that, first of all, I didn't quite get the gist of it because, of course, I would need more details. What I did say was, we are called not to condone unrighteousness. And there are too many people who say, well, I just don't want to get involved. You know, I'm busy doing this, I'm busy doing that, if I understood the question. And so my idea is that it would honor God to be involved, not to interfere, but to nonetheless be involved and help if you can. There may be situations that you can't. Not trying to put anybody in jeopardy here. But we don't want to be lazy Christians, and we don't want to be Christians that allow unrighteousness to occur without opposing it.
Yeah, and I think regardless of anything really, whatever your position is, you've got your integrity and you've got your Christian integrity, and you're really standing up for your Christian values. So if there is something that you see is the wrongdoing, despite what position or what role you have, I think you still need to continue along those Christian values that you have as well.
Exactly right.
Hopefully that's answered that viewer's question. This one here, it says, with regards to the question about Judas, whether he would have been in heaven or not. Jesus had made a comment about Judas concerning him in betrayal. Judas, didn't Jesus not mention the place Judas will be after betraying him following his death?
Not really. I mean, he was being used, no doubt, by Satan. But then again, God was allowing Satan to attack Judas. And if Judas genuinely repented, he threw the silver back. Suicide is not a good thing because you're murdering something made in the image of God. But it is not the unforgivable sin either. And as I said, you have an opportunity up to the point of death of still receiving salvation, regardless of the life you've led.
This one's from Catherine in Glasgow, Grady, saying, good evening, Dr. Grady. Question I've often wondered about was, where did Lazarus' soul go to when he was dead for 3 days? Blessings to you both, from Catherine.
Well, Catherine, he went to a place called Paradise. This is where all of the Old Testament saints for 4,000 years went, waiting for the resurrection, because even in the Old Testament, though they looked forward to Jesus, you know, Abraham could see it, Noah could see it, David could see the coming of the Lord, but they could not go to heaven until Jesus had made the atonement and the resurrection. And so they were in what we call maybe a warehouse, but it was called Paradise. It was a part of what is referred to as the underworld, which had many different departments: Tartarus, Lake of Fire, Gehenna, Hell, Abyss. And Paradise was a part of the underworld, but it was not a bad place. It was not a place of torment. I always like to say it was kind of like an air-conditioned warehouse with lounge chairs and flat screen TVs. But they were waiting. Some waited 4,000 years. Some waited 1-2 days. But before the resurrection, anybody who died in faith, their spirit soul went to paradise. Their body went into the ground. But at the time of the resurrection, it says that Jesus took captivity free. And that means he's talking about taking those that were in paradise and then transferring them to heaven. But there's an interesting note as well, because a few of the Old Testament saints stopped in Jerusalem and walked the streets of Jerusalem, having been resurrected, praising God, and then went to heaven. But initially, even Lazarus went to paradise. Then he was resurrected. And when he died, and he did a second time, I don't think he was afraid of it because he'd already been there once. And so he knew what it was going to be like. And remember, Jesus said to the thief who died on the cross next to him, today you will be with me in paradise.
Yep.
And so paradise was that holding area for anybody who in faith died prior to the resurrection, and then all of them are moved to heaven.
Dr. Grady, this one here is saying, thank you, Revelation TV, for Dr. Grady, as I've listened to him throughout the years. Dr. Grady is asking a question. Am I saved in Jesus' blood without baptism of water and my friends and family? And there's no name on that, but they're asking, are they saved in Jesus' blood without baptism of water?
I would put it this way. Every Christian should desire to have baptism, period. However, while we should have it, it is not salvation itself, but it's a part of a Christian's life. There are those who become Christians and then die, for instance, prior to being baptized, and it won't prevent them from going to heaven. But it is desirable, and it should be done if it is all possible.
Amen to that. Very quick one before we finish. Thomas is asking, thanks again for the programme. God, Dr. Grady, is the Book of Enoch scripture? That's from Thomas. In 30 seconds, if you can, please, sir.
Oh, I can do it in 2 seconds. No.
Very good. Wow. What a pro. Dr. Grady, what are your final words for our viewers tonight before we leave the programme?
Well, again, this is a time of turmoil with war in the Middle East as well as war in other parts of the world. And our faith is what we must keep. Your reliance on Jesus as Lord and Savior, and your faith that you're going to go to heaven in spite of all other things, that everything that happens, even wars, are done with God's knowledge, his foreknowledge of this and what it's going to come. And you have to rely on him and not us.
Amen. What a great ending to tonight's programme. Don't forget, thank you so much, Dr. Grady, for joining us tonight. RevelationTV.com/videos. Whatever is going on in your world today, I ask that you reach out to Jesus Christ. He will give you that light in your darkness. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray. Amen. Take care. God bless. See you next week. Bye-bye.